Combo sets. We're seeing more and more of it in the pros bags. Why are they doing it? What are the reasons for it, and what does it really mean to you? Is it something that you should be thinking about? What are the properties of the different heads that make them worth doing it with? And what could you glean from what the pros are doing in their bags on tour? So with so many different head styles out there, and each brand offering several categories of head, how do you know which one's right for you and which one suits which bit of the bag? We're seeing on tour so many long irons going to the more forgiving, sort of higher ball speed heads in the pros bags as well. Let alone at the very top end going to something like a driving iron like this Srixon head here. World #1 Scotty Scheffler has 2 of these in the bag, unless he's on a particular course where he's just put a 7-wood in. So why are the pros doing that? And actually, what are the considerations when you're looking at switching between the heads? There's the control versus forgiveness / distance. So we're going to hit a couple of different head styles. We're going to use the 2 Srixon heads, ZXi7 and ZXi5, to compare some of the data, but to explain why you might use each of these heads and what are the considerations from a gapping point of view when you're doing that. So let's start with the ZXi7. So the more player style head, it's more of a single piece forging, still got a bit of tungsten in the toe for a bit of toe stability, but you've got that kind of muscle bar in the middle. This is really a head geared around consistency, control, solid feel, but not so much help out the head. So we're generally, from a data point of view, would tend to get that slightly stronger launch, retain a little bit of spin. It's more about control. We're not looking for it to be a cannon of a head, but we want to get that softer feel off the head. But there's less tech in it, and the reason for less tech is the more tech goes into the head, the more you're moving the center of mass away, the more you get the flexion of the face. And historically, you used to get a lot of variations in spin, ball speed, and so distance. So you're using, the less tech you use, the more you're guarding against the one that goes long on you. So you tend to see the best players on tour, most of their short irons have very little tech in. And then as we move up the set, they get a bit more tech. So as you can see, this swing there, 16 launch, 4-7 on spin. Now the Srixon heads do keep the spin down a little bit versus some other heads. So 4-7 on a 6-iron is on the lower end, and we'd look for kind of over 5,000 really there. But lovely soft feel. There's no jump off the face. Good efficiency, 141, 177 carry, nice set of numbers, but we're not going to see lots of variations in there because ultimately they're not spreading loads of weight to the outer side of the heads and they're not putting loads of tech in. So very solid, very reliable, very controllable, great for the kind of the lower handicap player or where you're not looking to gain much from the head, just get a representative result. Let's move on to the ZXi5. So moving on to the ZXi5, what we've got here, wider sole, more tungsten in the toe, more perimeter weighting, marrage face to get a little bit more ball speed. So this head is, whilst it's still a forged frame, so it still technically falls into the slightly on the player's side of things, it's the more forgiving end of. So we're putting more tech in it, trying to gain a little bit of ball speed, get a little bit of performance. So prioritizing a little bit more distance versus reliability. So these are both exactly the same loft, so there's nothing changed there. A little bit clean. So what we've got there, slightly thinner strike, but even though I didn't absolutely middle that, we've got higher launch, lower spin, higher ball speed. I'm going to do one more to try and get as clean a hit as I did on the ZXi7, but automatically we're seeing a different pitch of flight. So while spin's down, we're still getting height, so we're still getting a certain amount of control into the green. But we've got a head that's designed to give me a little bit more back. That was a proper hit. So it's a less soft sound and feel because we've got that badge in the back, we've got that thinner face, we've got the tungsten in the head. All of that hardens the sound up. It kind of creates that slightly clickier note. So that kind of, it's still very stable. It's not a harsh note, but in order to gain that ball speed, the acoustics have to change because the materials change. So that's often what people talk about, that forged feeling, because most of the traditional forged heads are one piece. There's no tech in them whatsoever. The blades and things have that lovely soft sound and feel because there's no, that tungsten in the toe is a harder material and therefore creates a different pitch of note. So it hardens the sound up, but you're gaining forgiveness. So looking at that shot, there was a better hit. 144 efficiency, 18 launch, 4.4 on spin. So we've picked up a couple of degrees in launch angle, but we've lost 300 revs in spin. Picked up a few yards distance-wise as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto the screen and we'll compare the data and then talk about the reasons why you might make that switch, just referring back to the numbers a little bit now. So looking at the numbers here, and this tells us a little bit more about the differences in performance. So the swings with the ZXi5 were slightly slower, but what that gives us is actually the same ball speed. So we've gained that smash at 143 versus 141. Both are good, but there's a little bit more pop off the face. So even at a slower club speed and the same ball speed, we're looking at the yardage there, I've picked up 3 yards. So how is that possible? Well, the answer is the flight's more efficient. So that spin relative to launch angle of the ZXi5, we've got higher launch because the weight sits lower in the head. If I get their head back, we've got more tungsten in the bottom, so the center of mass gets under the ball, launches it up a little bit higher. But what it also does is it gears spin off. So you've got higher launch and lower spin. So if we're looking at with a driver, that maximizes yardage. It's total distance as well as a bit of extra carry. And we're seeing the same thing here. So we've picked up 3 yards of carry and 4 odd yards total. So the run out distance doesn't really change too much. We'll come on to another part of that in a moment. But we've gained a little bit of flight efficiency. So there are kind of critical factors here that under a certain speed, that lower spin could actually hurt you. At the speeds I'm swinging there, 85, I've still got enough height, which I will now talk about, to get that land angle, to get the control. So whilst it's launched 2 degrees higher, it's spun 300 revs less. Because of the extra height and launch angle, we've gone from 88 feet peak height to 100. And the land angle's gone from 44.5 to 46.9. So whilst the spin's less, because I've gained so much actual height, I'm still getting stopping power and control, as in kind of landing to run out distance control. So it is more forgiving, it is going a bit further, but it's still landing nice and softly. And so there'd be some people that would say, well, why would you ever not want that? The lower down the set you go, and this is where the combo set becomes an interesting thing, is the lower down the set you go, as loft goes up, that low center of gravity starts to get really quite deep in the head. And what happens is if you go into this sort of style head at too high a loft, for if it's an unsuitable head for you, at a high loft it pops the flight up. And then because you've not got the mass behind the ball at impact, the spin can become a little bit variable. And it's down that bottom end of the set where that front-back dispersion, flight control, solidity of feel, which is important to some players, you start to lose that. So we then look at the performance off the ZXi7, where we've got that muscle bar in the middle, that drags weight up the face. We haven't got as much tungsten in the bottom, and we haven't got as thin a face. So the center of mass sits higher and more on the back of the face rather than low and back. So we're not getting that weight popping underneath and flaring up. It keeps that short iron flight down and forwards, but retains the spin. It feels a little bit more solid as well. So you're managing between the different heads. At what point are you looking for that bit of extra ball speed performance, that bit of extra forgiveness, and that bit of extra launch angle, but conscious of not dropping the spin off too much so that you lose the stopping power. So there are a range of things from a performance point of view we'd actually look at to gauge where is that right point. And there's also the preference of the player. Do you prioritize forgiveness, or actually that extra bit of spin control and that slightly softer, what some players would say, nicer feel? Other players would say forgiveness and less twisting and less being able to notice a miss hit is nicer. And therefore you might go into the more forgiving head a bit further down the set. Other players, if they've played a less forgiving head in the past, just will prefer that softer feel, that higher center of mass, that more solid feel. So that there are sort of grey edges around here. There is no absolute right or wrong. There's generally 1 or 2 heads that you can cross over with and get perfectly good performance no matter which way you go. But it's whether your priority is a little less forgiveness, a little more feel, a little bit more spin flight control, a little more forgiveness, a little more margin of error, and you can afford to give up a little bit of spin just to gain that ball speed progression, because that's the other factor. The more tech you have, the more ball speed progression. So as you go up the set, you're getting an extra little bit of ball speed from more tungsten in the sole, more face tech. In something like the ZXi5, that progresses much more quickly. So you gain that ball speed, generally about 5 mile an hour ball speed requirement to get a full club length distance in carry from one club to the next. So several factors that go into it. And this is why a lot of the tour pros now wanting that extra launch angle, wanting that extra ball speed, playing into long par fours, long par threes, par fives, that extra height and ball speed gain for them at their speeds is starting to be much more of a benefit than they used to see. So we've looked at the sort of player's head and the sort of slightly more forgiving option as that split set, because that's generally where you're going to do it most. You look at Scotty Scheffler's bag and he adds in a couple of driving irons at the top end of the set. Here's a 3 and a 4 iron in an older model of this Srixon driving iron. And again, so that just extrapolates it out a little bit further. You've got more width to the sole, so you draw the weight further back from the face, makes it more forgiving, allows them to put more mass lower. Again, keeping that launch angle up. The difference with one of these heads versus a hybrid, this won't spin as much. So it's really about managing, as with the split in the irons, ball speed progression, and then where you want your launch and spin windows to be to get that control, whether it's a more forward running flight if you're playing links golf, or if you're playing on a kind of a softer parkland course where there's water hazards in front of greens, that higher flight and higher spin window may suit you more. The one thing with this, I know this video will provoke a lot of questions, and actually it's partly why I've done it. There are very few black and white answers in how you combo sets, how you split sets, because ultimately every player is different, the courses you play are different, ball striking abilities are different. So please, if you have questions, do send them in. I will do my best to answer them as quickly as possible, but we are in very busy season, but rest assured I will get back to your questions, because it will be different player to player. And the difficult bit is, how do you know? Well, ultimately, hitting them and deciding what your priorities are, how well do you hit each head. You know, there's a reason why some of the tour pros haven't gone more forgiving, because they don't feel like they need that extra forgiveness, but would prioritize the control. Whereas you then get others, you know, take Monty, we've worked with for years, played some game improvement irons and got to world number 2. There's a misconception that forgiving heads will stop you improving and achieving beyond a certain level. Equally speaking, some players, you know, maybe a higher handicap, but can strike these heads perfectly well. You've got to enjoy what you're using. And yes, there's a scoring side, and you know, that's incredibly important with golf, but you've got to enjoy your game. And for some players, the enjoyment is in finding the center one of these heads. And for others, it's get away with as much as possible and get the score as low as possible. But it's different for everyone. So any questions you've got, please do send them in. I'll do my best to get to them as quickly as possible. But it is a complicated question, and there are so many different answers that are relevant to different players in different ways. So as I say, you know, do send the questions in. We'll answer them as quickly as possible, but I hope this goes some way to explaining why you might utilize different heads for different parts of the set and why the tour players are doing so as well. But as I say, not a simple answer.